Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first ADHD Dude live on YouTube. I hope this works out because I think it's going to be a little more reliable than Facebook. So, welcome. I'm really glad you're here, and it is my absolute pleasure to be able to introduce Linda Murphy to you. So, if you have watched any of my webinars, know that Linda has had a tremendous influence on them, particularly webinar one that wouldn't exist if it weren't for Linda. And really, just her work has just influenced my thinking so much. If you've watched any of the lessons I do during summer trip camp, very much influenced by Linda's work as well. So this is really a special treat for me, and it is my pleasure to welcome Linda Murphy to ADHD Do Live. Hi, Linda.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being with us today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? And what you do when you're not here?
Yeah, I'm a mom to two busy boys, so I, take deep breaths and try to use declarative language as much as I can. And it's rubbing off on my husband, which is nice. He tries to. I'm a speech language pathologist for just about 20 years and a relationship development intervention consultant um, for about 10 years, or a little bit over 10 years now. But relationship development intervention, or RDI, is a treatment approach for kids. It was initially developed for kids with autism, but it's actually quite powerful for kids with lots of different developmental challenges. And we work very closely with parents to coach them on how to create opportunities to help their kids build social competence in natural environments.
Excellent. And you
So,
want to,
yeah.
yeah, and do you want to tell us a little bit about your practice?
Yeah. So I have a private practice in Beverly, Massachusetts. It's called Peer Projects Therapy from the Heart. My co-owner is an occupational therapist, Mary Lou Gagnon. And we provide speech therapy, social groups, occupational therapy, RDI, reading tutoring, math tutoring, craniosacral therapy. So a lot of different services. But what I just really love about our practice is that we try to be really family centered, and we care very much about building positive relationships with both kids and families, and everything we do comes from that place, and we all share similar styles of communicating with kids and families so that it is a positive learning environment for everybody and supportive. We care, I think, very much just about meeting kids where they are, no matter who they are or what their struggles have been, and just working as best we can to understand who they are and what their challenges are, as well as
Great.
their strengths too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when Linda told me that she was putting out a declarative language handbook, I thought to myself, this is amazing. I mean, this is so incredibly necessary, and the fact that it's a short book and a practical book. When I read it, and I was very honored that Linda gave me an advance copy, so I got to read it, and I said that every parent of a kid with ADHD should read this because this is obviously with any other strategy in life, it takes some practice and it takes some getting used to. But this is so incredibly important for kids with ADHD across the board. And I'm really happy that Linda also released it on audiobook because I am an audiobook guy. So I did buy it on audiobook when it became available. And I'll tell you, I'm always a little nervous when I buy audiobooks because you never know how the presenter is going to be. So I just kept thinking to myself, I hope this is good. I hope, and it's great. So it is available on Amazon and on Audible as well. And anywhere else, Linda?
I think Apple Books probably too is where
Apple
the
Books? Okay.
audiobook, yeah, is available.
Okay, I'm an Android guy,
Yeah,
so I know nothing about
yeah,
Apple. Yeah.
yeah.
So Linda, to start off, I would really love for you to kind of explain, your, kind of what you said to me the other day about how you see, a lot of adults, kind of view kids with ADHD, and explain that a little bit, before we get into talking about declarative language.
Yeah, I think, we do see a lot of kids at our practice with ADHD, and they might come because they have social learning challenges, or they're just, they're getting into trouble in school, in life, they're making mistakes, there's behaviors. And I just feel a lot of the time when we meet these kids, I just feel like they've been misunderstood, whether it's in school with a teacher or just people out in the community. They just think that this kid is a bad kid who behaves badly. And so then, what I might meet, depending on the age of the child, is someone who just really has developed this wall around them because they've been perceived so negatively by other people, or perhaps worry or anxiety because they're afraid of making a mistake because they've had so many mishaps socially in life. So when they come to our practice, and with the help of declarative language, of course, like our goal is to really see that child for who they is, and understand that they're not a bad kid. They have a learning challenge in the social realm, and it's my job to figure out how best to teach them and guide them so that they can be socially competent.
So, Linda, can you also, I would love to hear your definition of social learning challenges, because it is a term I use a lot in my Facebook group and here,
Yeah.
but I really want people to hear it from you.
Yeah. So when I think of social learning challenges, it might be any child who's having difficulty having successful social interactions. So it could be with peers, perhaps they get into conflicts, or they have difficulty compromising. They think in black and white ways, so they might get into conflict a bit more, or they might miss social cues or clues in the environment. They don't tune into what's going on around them. They might not perceive nonverbal communication in the same ways. And so then what you might end up having as a result is difficulty with perspective taking, being flexible. But I think social pragmatics just means that it's your social use of language. So a kid who has social learning challenges is having difficulty using their language across various social contexts. And it could be for a variety of reasons.
And Linda, can you talk a little bit about kids who are verbally articulate, how they can still have social learning challenges?
Yeah. Well, like for example, there's so many kids who are so bright and they have fantastic expressive language, but they have trouble perceiving maybe certain details out there. They might not perceive nonverbal communication. They might misinterpret nonverbal communication. They might miss a cue. So that could be an example where they're just not able to put it all together in the time that you need to put it together within the pace of a dynamic social interaction.
Great. So explain to us, for those who are unfamiliar with the term, what declarative language actually is and how it applies to our kids.
Yeah, so declarative language, so sometimes when I explain declarative language, it's helpful first to talk about what it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So if I start with imperative language is very directive language that tells a person exactly what to do. So it might be something like get your shoes, put on your coat, get in line. There's one and only one right answer. It's black and white. And in the behavior world, if someone doesn't respond to an imperative statement, they might be viewed as non-compliant or a behavioral challenge if it continues to happen. But then in contrast, declarative language is a comment. You're just stating an observation, a memory, something you're planning for, something you noticed, but you're not putting a demand on the child to do anything in particular. You're just making a statement. Like on a basic level, it's just a statement that invites a child to observe or think.
So I knew this was going to happen right away. You said something that really intrigued me. Talk a little bit about what you just said about when kids don't respond to imperative language. Sometimes people perceive them then as being a behavior problem.
Yeah. Well, that is like if you could be a teacher or you could be a parent and you're asking your child to do something and they don't do it, and then you get mad or the teacher gets frustrated because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And what might happen is you create a situation that gets escalated. Perhaps the adult gets frustrated with the child and then the child gets frustrated back. Yeah.
Perfect.
So yeah, and what again it might lead to is it could be some sort of overt behavior challenge where a child is yelling or they might run away. But sometimes too, it might lead to more internalizing behaviors, which might be shutting down or disengaging from an interaction, which are equally important. So I think, what you might see in terms of behavior might be those externalizing ones that everybody notices that maybe look like anger or whatever, but then the internalizing ones, which become worry and reticence and withdrawal, which again are just so important to notice and care for as well.
So I want to get into, talking about how we use declarative language to help build social competency. And, one of the things is I think, the article, my first article that I read by you is really focused more on executive functioning. And I think one of the things that, that really resonated with me was I said, oh, this is, I didn't realize that I am doing this and maybe just didn't know that there was a language associated, with it. So I do talk a lot, about perspective taking, and I, for particularly for kids with ADHD, that I see that as really, the kind of the foundation, right, of social learning, along with these other things. So can you talk a little bit about how parents can use declarative language to help build perspective taking? But I also want to hear if you agree with me or not about the, that being really the foundation for, for social learning. For kids, who we might consider, I don't want to use the word neurotypical, but do you know what I mean? Kids who don't have severe social learning challenges.
Yeah, but you're saying perspective taking.
Yeah.
That's the correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think on a very basic level, like what we want to help kids be able to do, like ADHD kids and all kids, they do care about other people. They really do. But what the challenge might be is that they're not as easily able to tune into all the pieces of information that someone who doesn't have social learning challenges or who is more socially competent can do in the moment as they need to. So, for example, when you're with somebody, you're immediately thinking about your memories of that person, your shared history, what that person might like or not like, what your experiences were prior to that meeting. You're also tuning into the context where you are. You're tuning into their body language. And if any of those pieces are hard to process in the moment and integrate and then provide a thoughtful response, you may look like you don't care about that other person. But it's not that you don't care about that other person. It's just that you're having difficulty integrating all those pieces related to the other person, which, is translated to you're having difficulty taking the perspective of the other person in this dynamic social moment in time. Because I think sometimes too, kids who are, smart and have higher level language, they can certainly perspective take out of the context. Like if you're reading a book with them and ask them, oh, how does so-and-so feel? They're usually right on, they get it. But it's in the dynamic moment that it's hard for them. They can't integrate all those pieces of information in that moment. And what declarative language really helps kids do is it presents the information in a positive, inviting, supportive, and objective way so that they can appreciate it on their own and have the opportunity to integrate it and then figure out the right thing to do or the thing that will be most supportive for the relationship that they have with that person.
So can I just say, I love how you kind of, integrated all those different pieces there, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize, right? That when we're talking about social learning, there is the situational awareness, right? There is the context piece. There is the sensory piece as well. And I think, a lot of times what people think is that, oh, my kid doesn't read social cues, but it's so much more complex than that. And there's so many more of these pieces. And I think what you just said kind of what really resonated was that declarative language can help bring this all together, in a way to, facilitate learning in real-time environments. And we know for kids with ADHD, that's really the best way you learn. I mean, did I summarize that pretty accurately?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes too, when I think about it, it's almost like it's the glue that's going to help bring it all together for kids. Like it's the glue that's going to help them see all those pieces that someone who doesn't have social learning challenges just knows intuitively, but a child who doesn't, it just helps them notice and think about what's important in that dynamic social moment.
I love that what you just said about it being the glue. That's great. I'm going to steal that from you. Yeah. So let's kind of bridge that a little bit into, before we come back to it, about how declarative language is really critical to building executive functioning. And one of the things I would like you to kind of talk about is explain a little bit, because I don't use the term imperative language, but I use the term prompt dependence a lot. So can you explain to people a little bit about how imperative language keeps kids kind of hooked on being prompt dependent, whereas declarative language, the focus is to shift them away from being prompt dependent and using their own inner voice, or what I call your brain coach more?
Yeah. And I think another way, and this is RDI actually definitely gave me this vocabulary and way to think about this, but it's really process over product. Like, do you want the child to learn the process of problem solving or the process of what you're doing so that ultimately they can do it on their own someday? Or do you just care about that product in the moment? And I think, yeah, you can get that product in the moment and it's done, but it doesn't move towards independence or long-term learning. Like, our goal is to get that child independent so that they can do these things on their own. But in order to do that, we have to slow down and teach process, not product.
So I want to bring something up about what you just said there. I find for a lot of the kids I work with, and I don't mean to be sexist here, but mothers tend to be a little better with this. Okay, I'm going to be honest. They tend to be a lot better with this. Where sometimes I find fathers are just really focused on product, right? And it's kind of like, I don't want to have to deal with all that stuff. I'm just going to tell them what to do and get it done, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so can you talk a little bit about why this process is so critical long term and not just in the 5-minute future when you're trying to get out the door?
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes you do have to pick and choose. Like, you have to be imperative sometimes because we all have time constraints, and that's okay.
Right.
But if your goal is for your son or your daughter to be independent in life and go away to college and not need you, then it's super important to spend time slowing down and teaching process so that they can get there. If we're just prompting and focusing on the next thing, and we never slow down to give them a chance to step back and integrate all those pieces and become independent, then they're not going to get there.
Right. And so I just thought of something else as well. One of the things I tell parents a lot is I have this saying. I say, stay in your lane. Don't try to be your kid's social skills coach, okay? Because number one, you're probably not going to do it correctly, or you're going to teach them things that maybe, particularly with boys, that maybe aren't exactly the way boys relate to each other, what their social communication sounds like. But that being said, I think that parents can obviously be their kid, coach their kids using declarative language, So talk a little bit about what a parent's role is in, using declarative language in the moment to help build social thinking skills, if you can.
Yeah. Well, and I think, like, when you start using it, like, you even have to back way up and make sure you're approaching the child with a positive mindset, because if it's just going to be another form of nagging, then it's not getting at what we want it to get at. Like, declarative language, it has to be from the heart, with understanding, with patience, like we're working towards social competence together. And in your heart, you trust that your child wants to do the right thing. You have to have that belief, because if you have any other notion, it's going to come out negatively toward the child. They're going to feel it, and it's just going to feel like another set of imperative statements. So, if you get good practice just with this positive mindset and positive communication style, which declarative language is great for, then the child will be more open as you provide that coaching in the moment. They're not going to have their guard up again so high that you're telling them that they did something wrong. They understand that you have their back, you're on their side, and you're just trying to give them information that they don't yet have, because you care for them and you want them to be successful. So even like an example might be if we're in a group, like working with kids together, and somebody says something to another kid and it bothers the other kid or annoys them or upsets them, like, I'm going to approach that child with a social learning challenge that I'm going to say, like, they didn't know that their comment would have that impact on their peer. They just sometimes are impulsive and say things without thinking. So a declarative statement in the moment might be like, you know what, I know you care a lot about your buddy and you probably didn't notice, but I think that hurt his feelings. And a lot of the time the child will then pause and say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize. And they apologize. They make that repair. But it has to be that safe place where kids know when they make a mistake, you're not judging them, but you're supporting them, and you have their back and you understand them.
Yeah. Linda, one of the things, and I hadn't actually thought of this before, but I want to ask you about this now. When I see kids who, and I don't see that really here, but I saw it, when I was still in Pennsylvania. When I see kids who have had exposure to social thinking in school, one of the things that I find a lot is they've had maybe exposure to Superflex and that's it. And usually the teacher or speech language pathologist is throwing the social thinking books, and say, here, teach this. But one of the things is I find a lot of times, teachers sometimes use, the language, social thinking language, like expected and unexpected behaviors as a discipline tool, right? Mm-hmm. And when you do that, right, when you say that's unexpected, for me, there's not a learning piece in that, right? If it's not attached to integrating it with declarative language and basically what you just said. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and there's definitely on the social thinking website, there's a do's and don'ts checklist
yes.
or list where, but that's it. We're not trying to catch kids doing the wrong thing and punish them. We're trying to guide their social learning. So when you use expected, unexpected, you want to communicate those terms in a thoughtful, supportive way, because kids are doing the best that they can with what they have in the moment.
Right. So I want to ask you something else I just thought of, that when I meet with families, and prefer, to work on social with their sons, sometimes they'll say, how long is this going to take? And I say their lifetime, right? Because learning social is a lifelong process. But the other thing I explain to them is, if your son got to age 12, and missed learning some social information intuitively, I can't teach him in 2 months what he hasn't gained in, 2 years. Mm-hmm. So I think, I guess where I'm going with this is to say, I think that social learning has to be a joint process. And I understand that not everybody has access or maybe the resources to work with somebody, who can help their son or daughter learn social. But what would you say, in terms of parents who really want to work on this with their kids, but, don't feel completely comfortable in the sense that they're not with their kids during school most of the day. They don't kind of know where to start. Do you think that if parents learn to use declarative language, does that kind of help, do they become more naturally intuitive to the social learning process from that, do you find?
Yeah, I think so. I think another really important partner, I should say, to declarative language is pacing. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes when people make imperative statements or make demands on kids, it might be a fast pace and they don't give kids a lot of time to think. If they haven't responded, they say it again. So with declarative language, you don't want to do that either. You want to make a declarative statement, but then really give the child time and space to process what you've said and respond. And so I think as parents learn to speak in a declarative way, a really important partner is to also learn to pace and be quiet after you've made the statement, because that's when you can observe what your child has processed, what they understand, how they respond, and it helps you catch the breakdown. Like you might see that they heard you, they got it, they're able to do the next thing, or you notice that there's been a breakdown of some sort. They misunderstood something, they forgot something. So I think as you use declarative language along with slowing down and pacing, that will keep you in tune with where their social learning is.
And Linda, what happens if a kid doesn't respond, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I think so much about this, and I have a whole chapter in the book called Troubleshooting Tips. And I think, it's not a recipe at all, like by any means, but what you want to do is really read your child's cues in the moment to figure out, like, okay, I made this statement, what might be some reasons why they did not respond? And in the book, I have a list of several reasons why. Like in my experience, I think it might be because maybe they didn't hear you and you were too far away. Maybe they were paying attention to something else and you didn't adequately secure their attention. Maybe they're distracted. So there's things that you can do, like you can oftentimes I might call a child's name, wait for them to look towards me, and then when I know, or say what, and then when I know we're on the same page, then I make the statement. So that's one easy troubleshooting tip, is you just want to make sure you have their attention before you make a declarative statement. But then other reasons might be, they maybe didn't understand and you have to actually break it down a bit more. But yeah, like there's lots of different reasons why a child might not respond. And I think the important takeaway is give your child the benefit of the doubt that there's a reason, and as their caregivers and teachers, like we want to figure out why so that we can support them at the level that they need to be supported to then learn moving forward.
So, Linda, one of the things I'm anticipating this question coming, parents will often say to me, and they say, well, my son says, he doesn't care or he doesn't want
Mm-hmm.
friends. And one of the
Yeah.
things I find is by about age 14, 13, 14, kids, particularly boys with ADHD have had so much, particularly with a, more impulsive profile, they've had so much rejection, social rejection. They've been told what they've been doing wrong so much that saying, I don't care or I'm not interested, right? It's really kind of a defense mechanism because
Mm-hmm.
this, they haven't had the resources to learn this stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
what I tell parents is when kids say that, don't respond to it. And just kind of let it go, right? Because just
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I want to hear what you think, if you use declarative language, you pause, which, and by the way, I love in the audiobook how she does the pause part. It's great. you know so
Yeah.
when we use declarative language, pause, right? Your son or daughter says I don't care, or whatever. That doesn't mean that they didn't hear you, or that doesn't mean they're not processing it, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the things that happens so frequently with parents of kids with ADHD is they get sucked into what I call the argument vortex. And like,
Mm-hmm.
so the kid will say I don't care, or this is stupid, and they say, well, you need to care. And then, right, and then, do you think that the message of the piece of using declarative language in that teachable moment becomes lost if a parent starts going down the argument vortex?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, when kids say that to me, I just want to validate their feelings. I just say, I hear you. I
Mm-hmm.
understand how you feel. I'm not there in that moment to argue or to convince
Right.
them. And I just want to understand where they're coming from. Like, I totally agree with you that the kids have been through so much, and it's been so hard because they've been so misunderstood, that's now their defense mechanism, is to not care. Um, so it is. It's just that first goal, even with declarative language, is to help them feel safe to be vulnerable and open to learning, because some of them just have their guard up so high.
Right. I want to tell you a story real quick. I got a phone call, not a phone call. I got a email from a parent a few weeks ago, and she said, my 14-year-old daughter with ADHD, she has kind of lost all her social ties over the years, and nobody can handle being around her, because of how much she interrupts and her impulsivity and so on. She said, and we go to her therapist, a mental health person, not a speech language person. She said, and the therapist and I sit there and try to convince her why she's turning people off, and she doesn't listen and she runs out of the room. And I said to her, well, then that's not working, and you need to take a different approach. So
Mm-hmm.
I referred her to a speech language person who I knew was in the area. And one of the things I want parents to understand is, particularly for the kids I work with, that we there's still this mindset in our society that, oh, your kid has ADHD, you have to go to a therapist, right? And I'm really, my one of my things is I want to move people away from that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because I say ADHD is a learning issue first and foremost that may or may not have a mental health component. One of the things I do believe is that speech language pathologists can approach things in a way that are not going to put kids on the defensive. Okay. But what I would like you to talk about is, how can a family, because I'm going to get questions about this,
Mm-hmm.
after you go, how can a family know that somebody they're working with kind of gets what we're talking about and understands this piece?
Yeah. So understands the piece that it's learning versus,
Well,
yeah.
understands about declarative language, right? And it's not,
Oh,
and there's more to social learning than just opening a book and talking about expected and unexpected behaviors, you know what I
yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, um, observe the therapeutic relationship. Does your child like seeing that person? Do they feel safe? Do
Mm.
they feel supported? And it's not going to necessarily happen right away. It takes time to develop trust and relationships. But, one of the first things I always think about when kids are with me is, how do I help this child feel confident in the moment and form positive memories within the context of our time together and our relationship, so that they want to come back for more, so that we can continue on this journey of learning together. So I think even the connection your child has with the therapist is extremely important. Does the child feel like the therapist understands them? What's the child's attitude or mood when they leave? That's probably the best indicator.
That's such a good point. Yeah, I really
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, and Lynn, I just want to point out, and my apologies about this. I will fix it. I put for Linda's practice website Peer Projects from the Heart, but is actually Peer Projects Therapy from the Heart.com. Correct?
Right.
Yes. Okay, I will
Hmm.
fix that. So Peer Projects Therapy from the Heart.com. I was just trying to fix it while you were talking, but I can't figure it out. So
Yeah.
all right. So, help us understand how somebody can, particularly for, parents of younger kids who maybe their grandparents are really involved, aunts and uncles, who other family members involved in child rearing, babysitters, so on, or spouses, significant others. How can people bring others on board with understanding one, the importance of using declarative language, but also making sure that they're doing it in a way that's positive, right, and it doesn't focus on the behaviors.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, the reason I wrote the book is just there was no good resource out there. Like, I think this is something that's so important to me, and I also couldn't believe there wasn't anything written yet about
Mm-hmm.
it. And when I wrote it, I did try and write it in a concise, practical way so that it's super accessible information to anybody who might want to read it. But they also, I have free articles that parents can download from my website, and so that could be another way to introduce the idea of declarative language. That's not quite a book. But I think modeling can be huge. So if one parent feels comfortable using it and and starts and notices the dynamic change with the child, then other people have the opportunity to observe that. I think everybody's on their own learning journey, and you can't tell people what to do, but you can give the information and hope that they give it a try because they want what's best for the child.
So, is there a way you think that a parent can kind of explain in a really concise way to maybe their spouse or somebody else who's maybe not
Hmm.
initially on board with this? Look, this is going to help him or her develop, socially and develop their executive functioning. And is there kind of a concise way to say that?
Yeah, I think you just said it.
Okay. All
Yeah, and
right.
I think sometimes, like, I just think um, the communication style that other people have been using, is it working? And just inviting people to reflect on, is the style of communication that you've been using, which maybe is directive or demand based or prompting constantly, is it working? Are you getting where you want to be? Does it feel good? Or is it a communication style where everybody is frustrated and angry and nobody's happy? And people just have to dig deep and want something different and to know that something different is possible. I don't know sometimes if parents are equally discouraged as kids just from long patterns of negative communication. So you kind of have to have the hope and trust that it can be different. And you have people like me and Ryan saying it can be different, but you just got to give it a try. Yeah, and there is, research-wise, if I even were to get into that
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit, there is the the broaden and build theory of positive emotions. It's a positive psychology theory that just talks about how um, the more negative emotions a person feels, the more they go down a negative spiral, which leads to more rigidity, more black and white thinking, maybe more arguing. So that's where negative emotions go. They just go down this dark
Right.
path that doesn't feel good to anybody. But positive emotions and joy, they lead to upward spirals, which lead to openness to learning, flexibility, um, all the things that you want to get to with kids who are struggling. So there's research out there on how positive emotions lead to upward spirals, which help kids be open to learning. So from a research base, this is supported. It's not necessarily a study on declarative language, but declarative language is a positive communication style,
Mm-hmm.
whereas demand-based communication is negative and it can go negative quickly.
Is that actually a term, Linda? Demand based communication? I never heard that before.
Yeah, I don't know. It might not be. I might have just made that up. But yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, tell us a little bit, because I love how you frame this about why you don't do quote social skills groups at your practice,
Mm-hmm.
and why you don't like to use the term social skills, because the way you explain it is so much more eloquent than I could ever
Yeah.
explain it. Yeah.
And I honestly, like, I'm still searching for that best name for groups. We call them social groups or social pragmatic
Mm-hmm.
groups, but I don't like the name social skills group because it's too narrow. Like, I'm not teaching discrete skills that are going to fix everything. I want to go for social competence and giving kids opportunities to learn, have social learning opportunities in a dynamic environment. So I think just saying we're teaching social skills doesn't do justice to the learning that we want to happen.
Right, right. And and I obviously this is the social piece is what I'm most passionate about, it, and I can
Mm-hmm.
talk about this for forever. But I think something else that you said to me the other day really resonated, is about the way that, and you actually what you said before here too, is that if you're going to address something in the moment, right, and you use declarative language, then you're teaching in the moment, right? And the idea, what I want parents to understand is the idea with helping kids to build social competency is not teaching rote memorization of scripted socially appropriate behaviors. It's teaching them how to think in a social context, right? So the idea being that eventually they can apply those skills outside of there, but they need to be able to think that way first with their internal dialogue, or what I call your brain coach.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fairly accurate?
Yep.
How I just described that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You sure?
Yep.
All right,
Good.
good, good. So, before we take some questions, Linda, tell us, a little bit, about the book in terms of how it's laid out, and is it something people can start using
Mm-hmm.
right away? What if they feel kind of stuck? Yeah.
Yeah. So I do. My goal is, um, if you want more background information on social learning and different areas of social learning, that's there at the beginning of the book. But there's
Mm-hmm.
also the very first chapter, I think, is what you need to know to get started right away. So I just didn't want people to have to wait for the practical strategies around
Right.
what to do and how to do it. So if you read the very first chapter, you'll right away get an idea of how we're thinking and what this might look like. And then it goes on to talk about those areas, like a dive deep into social learning areas, for people who are interested. Um, and then I get more into the mechanics of declarative
Mm-hmm.
language and what, the nuts and bolts of how to construct declarative statements, or things that I've thought about over the years. Um, and then I have some practice things. I have a little bit on research, just kind of what's out there right now. And then two important chapters are just on this idea of pacing, where you really have to give kids time to think, and just troubleshooting, so that people can know, just to have some beginning ideas of what to do when it doesn't work, or a child doesn't respond to a declarative statement.
Right. And, one of the things I want parents to understand is that, this is something that you'll read and right away you can, apply this. And that's what I love about it. It is so practical. There's not chapters and chapters of theoretical, academic
Mm-hmm.
information. This is a book to use to be functional and to get to the point right away with it, and to really be able to use it right away. So that's what I really appreciate about it. Because I find so many books that I read or listen to, it's 6 chapters in, 7 chapters in before they get
Mm-hmm.
to the meat of it. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really appreciate that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the way you did this. So let's see if we have some questions. Yeah. So, and thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. I can monopolize Linda's time with my questions, because I can sit here and do a 6-hour live with her, because I have so many questions, because I learned so much from her. But I'm going to be generous today. All right. So first question, Linda. My 14-year-old son has friends, but always feels like he is imposing himself on them unless they invite him over. How do I help him get to hang out on his own organically? I try to tell him, but he pushes back.
So can you read that again? Read it a little
Yeah.
slower. I want to process it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, so my 14-year-old son has friends, but always feels like he is imposing himself on them unless they invite him over. How do I help him get to hang out on his own organically? I try to tell him, but he pushes back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just like I feel like there's probably no cookie cutter answer or anything that I could say quickly without knowing a bit more about him. I think sometimes, I'd want to know, is his perception accurate or not accurate? And if it's not accurate, like his friends really do enjoy being with him, then I would want to help him pull on his memories of past experiences where he's had a good time with the kids, because they might not just come as easily. He might not as easily recall those memories. And, I'm sure you probably do say those things, but it might be a matter of writing them down with him. Sometimes I even think helping kids just spend time with one kid rather than three or four, so that they can really feel that connection with another kid, can be
Mm-hmm.
helpful. There's just so many pieces to it that,
So
yeah, I feel like, I'm sorry, I don't have a quick answer for that one.
yeah. So, Linda, I have to ask, because you brought this up, because talk a little bit about what you just explained, in terms of episodic memory,
Hmm.
because I think that's something that would really be helpful for parents to understand, given the context of what you explained about
Yeah.
drawing on past experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, episodic memory, what it is, it's almost like your own personal narrative. Like, you understand where you've been, where you're headed, and in any moment in time, you're able to access memories that are relevant to the here and now that help you manage this moment in time. So kids whose episodic memory is weaker, and maybe especially for the ADHD guys, the stronger memories are the negative ones, and those are the ones that they
Right.
pull in the moment, and it's so much harder for them to pull the positive memories. So there may have been positive memories, but they can't get it in the moment when they're feeling down.
Right.
So even, around this idea with this 14-year-old, it might be a matter of building positive memories from this point forward, or not building them, but documenting them in some way. A lot of the times I suggest journals. Like, I know, writing a journal might not be a thing for a 14-year-old, but you might want to figure out a way to help them capture the positive memories and not just the
Mm-hmm.
negative ones, so that when they're in a moment or a downward negative spiral and they can't access those positive memories, you have something concrete that you've put together to show them that their interpretation in that moment is not accurate. Because that's, it might be something like that, where they just can't pull the accurate information in the moment because the negative emotions are too big.
Right. Um,
So, yeah.
Thank you.
And even,
Yeah.
as you use declarative language over time, that's what you're constantly doing, is you're constantly spotlighting those moments that are important for the child to be able to retrieve in the future. So as a positive memory happens, you comment on it using declarative language, knowing that you're mindfully helping that child store that memory for future retrieval
Mhm.
when they may be likely to feel negative.
Wow. If I could ever explain things like you can explain it, that my life will be complete.
Yeah.
Seriously. Wow. So there are so many great questions here, but I can't keep Linda all day, unfortunately. I'm just going to ask before Linda, do you have time for like two more questions?
Hmm.
Okay.
Sure.
So before I ask questions, I'm just going to ask everyone, please, if you have not already, please subscribe to the channel, and please hit like on this video, because when you hit like, it lets YouTube know that this content is relevant and is helpful to people. And personally, I think this is the best content on YouTube. Not me, Linda. So please hit like on the video. Okay, so great question. Lori asked, for kids who have slower processing speeds, organic conversations with their peers are hard because of the pacing challenges. Any
Hmm.
suggestions?
Yeah. So sometimes, I really, like, if I want to build a child's social competence, I really try to be. So this is in a group, like, for example, a group at my practice. I want to think about the peers that I'm matching them with, and
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it can be really important to match kids with similar processing speeds, so that kids feel competent around each other. Because I just think it's so important for kids to have time to think, process, respond. And if kids are similar in processing speed, it feels balanced, and you're likely to get that authentic friendship. But if your child happens to be with kids who are faster processors, then it might just be a matter of educating the kids around your child because you want your child to be competent, and they have a lot to say. And if they don't have time, they're not going to get there. So within groups, for example, at our practice, if a faster kid interrupts a child who's working to get their words out, then I will say, oh, you know what, I really care about what you're saying, but I'd love it if you could hold your thought, because, Johnny has something that he's saying. Or I might point out, for the faster peer, I might say, so-and-so is thinking, let's give him a minute. And then I'm helping that faster processor recognize the body language of the slower processor, so they can appreciate and respect that. But then also what you're doing ultimately is you're giving information to the slower processor about him or herself as a learner, so that ultimately they can self-advocate. So they might be able to say to their friend, oh, give me a minute, I'm thinking, or I want to say something, can you give me a minute? Or they figure out ways to maintain the speaking floor, so that the faster peer doesn't interrupt them.
Right.
So, it could be, I think it's a little bit of education for the peers, a little bit of thinking about peer choices, but then a little bit of teaching your child how to self-advocate and have a good appreciation of who they are as a learner.
Right.
Yeah.
So Linda, this is a great question. I think is really relevant to a lot of families. So can you offer any help for explaining or introducing this to my son's teachers for the coming school year?
Yeah. What do you want? Give them, I would just say download one of my articles. I have a website too. Sorry, I'm sorry to have so many. It's just different places. But on lindakmurphy.com, I have a lot of articles that are free to download. So there's a couple on there on declarative language. It's free. That could be a good starting point for the teacher. Or maybe start with if the child, they might or might not, I know, get speech therapy, but if there's a speech language pathologist on the team, they might be the ones that are ready to go with this information. I think you just have to have one ally in there who is willing to give it a try and see the difference. And I have definitely seen a lot where teachers don't know about declarative language, and the parents are the ones who bring it to the teachers. So
that's
you try it
interesting.
out. Yeah, you try it out at home, and you notice it's a good, effective strategy that's supportive and positive. And teachers might really appreciate it, because then they have the opportunity to see that as well. So
Right.
It's just a matter of, it might just be that simple. Just introduce it to them and tell them there's a better way, there's a nicer way, there's a more positive and supportive way.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. One more question. This is from Acton Academy in Concord, not too far from you. If it is that Concord, Mass. So I have a learner in my studio that tries to get attention from their peers by taking something from them or saying a friend's name over and over. How can I help? So I think what they're looking for is, model the language for them, if you could, please.
Right. And so I definitely get this question a lot, and I feel like there's two ways to think about it. One is, you might wonder, is there a breakdown in perspective and the child just doesn't know that they're bothering their peer, in which case it could just be a statement like, I don't know if you noticed this, but that bugs your peer when you do that, which is different from stop it, which is just imperative and doesn't give them that much language. But I think often it might be in part perspective taken, but often it's problem solving, and that the child probably wants to engage the other kids, but hasn't yet figured out a better way to do it. So they need your help to problem solve better ways to engage with their kids that will be received positively. So it might be a private conversation with the child to say something like, you know what, I noticed when you do that, it kind of bugs the other kids, but I also know that you really want to be friends with them and play with them. So let's think together about some other ways that you could connect with your kids or play with the other kids that they'll probably like. So it's just like that little learner is stuck. It's a problem solving. So if you treat it behaviorally, you never get to the problem solving and helping them figure out what's different, what can they do different in that moment in time. And that's where you want to get to. You don't want to get stuck at trying to stop the behavior. You want to help get them forward to, what could I do instead?
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, Linda, I could sit here and pick your brain all day if you let me. Seriously, this was amazing. Such good information. Obviously, I cannot recommend the book enough. So please, Audible, Amazon, please get Linda's book. It will make your life at home, and I think most importantly, it'll make your relationship with your son or daughter better as well when you learn to use declarative language. So benefits all around to everybody. I can't plug it enough. So real quick, I thought I did put lindakmurphy.com for articles up here. It seems like it's not showing up yet, but I will post that as well when we're done. So again, Linda's practice is Pure Projects Therapy from the Heart.com. The book website is declarativelanguage.com. And Linda, there is something to download on the Declarative Language website, correct?
Yeah, there's some of the activities I think are up there that I posted in the book, and I think the most that's what it mostly is some activities that you could do, or there's like how to measure progress tracking sheet for parents, so just areas of change that you might notice, and to kind of track yourself over time to see if it feels different from you for week to week once you've gotten started.
Right. Excellent. Any parting words? Any last piece of advice for everyone?
Yeah, no, just thank you so much for caring about this as much as I do. I really appreciate you putting me in front of so many people and parents out there that this can help. So thank you. Just thank you for having me.
Thank you, because I wouldn't know what I'm doing if it weren't for you. So I mean that. And just real quick too, I want to mention for those teachers who are here and for the speech language people, Linda's first book that she co-authored with Michelle Garcia Winner, Social Thinking and Me, I just call it the Blue Book, is a tremendous resource as well. I have used it forever with my guys in elementary school and still use it. So I just wanted to mention that as well. All right, Linda, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. All right, take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.